In the early morning haze of December 8, 1941, just hours after the thunder of bombs faded over Pearl Harbor, a lesser-known fact circulated quietly through the upper tiers of U.S. Navy intelligence. Several reconnaissance aircraft sent to track the retreating Japanese fleet never returned. Their disappearance added an eerie uncertainty to an already catastrophic day. While America reeled from the surprise attack, one chilling question lingered in the minds of a few analysts. Had the assault been only the beginning? The struggle unfolding in Washington and Pearl Harbor was more than logistical. It was psychological. Admiral Husband Kimmel, relieved of command within hours, reportedly muttered, "We've only seen what they wanted us to see." His words reflected a deeper fear. Analysts at Station HYPO scrambled to decode Japanese signals, but the raw shock of the attack left even seasoned cryptographers unsure of what would come next. The Pacific Fleet lay crippled, Arizona destroyed, Oklahoma capsized, California and West Virginia sinking in the mud of Battleship Row. Hangars at Hickam and Wheeler Fields burned like torches visible from miles away. Yet amidst the smoke, one glaring vulnerability became apparent. Hawaii's defensive perimeter, far from impenetrable, had been exposed as dangerously fragile. Historical context paints an even starker picture. Japan's first air fleet, the Kido Butai under Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, had demonstrated an unprecedented level of coordination and reach. 6 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, assembled the most powerful naval airstrike force in the world at the time. U.S. planners had never imagined such a concentration could cross the Pacific undetected. The fact that they had done so once raised the terrifying possibility they could do it again. And quickly. In a diary recovered decades later, Radioman Second Class Harold McBride wrote, "We kept waiting for them to come back. A second wave. Troop ships. Anything. Every silhouette on the horizon looked like an invasion." His fears were not unfounded. Historically, the Japanese High Command did debate the feasibility of a Hawaiian invasion, though logistics and interbranch disagreements prevented any serious planning. But on this day, December 8, the uncertainty felt real. Reconnaissance gaps and communication breakdowns meant no one could confirm where Nagumo's carriers had gone. The reveal of intelligence failures deepened the tension. Several long-range PBY Catalina patrol planes from Patrol Squadrons VP-11 and VP-23 had been dispatched from Midway and Oahu to shadow retreating Japanese vessels. Most returned with little to report. But 2 never came back. Their final radio transmission cited enemy force, bearing, cut off mid-sentence. No wreckage was found. No further signals were heard. The disappearance of the Catalinas, likely victims of Japanese Zero fighters or ocean forces, became the first mystery in the hours after Pearl Harbor. To commanders still reeling from the attack, it raised an ominous possibility. Perhaps the Japanese fleet had not withdrawn at all. The implications for modern strategy are significant. Analysts today frequently study December 1941 not only for the failures of readiness but for the psychological shock that paralyzed decision-making. The United States had radar capability at Opana Point, early warning networks, and intelligence analysts trained to interpret signals. Yet none of these prevented the devastation. The lesson is clear: technology without interpretation, readiness without leadership, and intel without communication can all fail simultaneously, creating catastrophic blind spots. As the day progressed, the U.S. Army's Hawaiian Department scrambled to establish defensive positions. Machine gun nests appeared along Oahu's northern beaches. The 24th and 25th Infantry Divisions deployed roadblocks, anticipating paratrooper assaults that would never come. Coast artillery batteries at Fort Kamehameha, Kauai Point, and Kaneohe swiveled toward the sea, scanning endlessly for shapes in the water. Civilian defense volunteers patrolled cliffs and cane fields with little more than rifles and fear. Despite these preparations, a gnawing uncertainty prevailed. Every report of an unidentified aircraft sent alarms through the command. Every ship sighted on the horizon was scrutinized through binoculars, its silhouette measured against intelligence photos of Japanese transports. Rumors spread of carrier groups regrouping north of Oahu. Some believed the Japanese were preparing a second strike, others feared a landing operation. Although history tells us Nagumo chose withdrawal, the people of Hawaii could not have known that on December 8th. And that lingering fear, the sense of a hidden enemy somewhere beyond the swell of the Pacific, hung heavily over the island chain. As night fell over Oahu, searchlights swept the dark ocean, picking up nothing but waves. Anti-aircraft crews remained at their guns, sleepless and strained. No invasion had come. No second strike appeared. But the unanswered questions, the lost patrol planes, the unexplained radio intercepts, the eerie silence from the north, left commanders uneasy. What if the Japanese fleet had not vanished into the vast Pacific? What if its retreat was only temporary, masking plans for something far more ambitious? Those questions would define the next critical hours, setting the stage for the scenario that could have redefined the Pacific War. At dawn on December 9, 1941, an unusual entry appeared in the logbook of the light cruiser USS Phoenix. No enemy contact. No confirmation of fleet withdrawal. It was a quiet line, nearly invisible among the chaos of the past 48 hours, but it captured a critical truth. No one in the U.S. Pacific Command truly knew where the Japanese First Air Fleet had gone. The assumption of Japan's retreat had no evidence behind it. And in war, assumptions are dangerous. Inside Japan's high command, however, the struggle was not between fleets, but between visions of strategy. Historical records from the combined fleet staff revealed deep divisions in Tokyo even before Pearl Harbor. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto believed a decisive blow could force the United States into negotiation, but he also knew America's industrial capacity made long-term conflict unwinnable. Some officers, including Rear Admiral Ryanosuke Kusoka, advocated pressing their advantage immediately, potentially through an occupation of Hawaii itself. Yet others in the Naval General Staff argued that such an operation was logistically impractical, requiring troop numbers and supply lines Japan simply did not possess. This insight into Japanese decision-making is critical. By 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy had perfected carrier warfare but lacked the amphibious capabilities required for large-scale island invasions far from home. Their successes in Malaya, Hong Kong, and the Philippines relied on shorter supply routes and nearby land-based air support. Hawaii was a different challenge entirely. Still, the idea of a follow-up attack, either a second strike against Pearl Harbor's fuel depots or an invasion, was not theoretical. It was discussed, debated, and ultimately rejected. One excerpt from Yamamoto's own correspondence, dated late 1941, reads, "The fleet can strike a blow, but not hold distant territory without grave cost." But this caution was not universal. Some staff officers, emboldened by the Pearl Harbor success, pushed for bolder moves. And in the immediate days after the attack, their influence briefly rose, before Nagumo's decision to withdraw solidified the fleet's path. For American commanders, these disagreements were unknown. What they saw instead was a pattern of mysterious absence. Aerial searches found nothing. Radio silence from the north persisted. Even the usually sensitive direction-finding stations reported no reliable fixes on Japanese transmissions. It was as if the Kido Butai had vanished into the Pacific fog. The reveal that added to the uncertainty came from a decrypted diplomatic message, one of the few successes in the chaotic days after the attack. The intercepted note hinted at next phase operations, but provided no geographic specifics. Analysts feared it might refer to operations near Hawaii. In Washington, the Office of Naval Intelligence drafted urgent memoranda warning that the enemy's carrier group may still be within operational range. It was a guess, but one rooted in the stark reality of how little the U.S. actually knew. Adding to the American unease, the Pacific Fleet's search patterns were severely limited. Fuel reserves were dangerously low after the attack, and many surviving destroyers lacked sufficient endurance for extended patrols. The carriers USS Enterprise and USS Lexington were at sea, lucky to have escaped the Pearl Harbor attack, but they too operated cautiously, aware that the Japanese still held superior numbers. Every hour spent searching risked ambush. Meanwhile, Tokyo attempted to maintain secrecy about Nagumo's movements. Japanese after-action reports describe a series of strict radio silence protocols, with transmissions allowed only for urgent situations. Pilots were ordered not to break silence even if lost or damaged unless facing imminent capture. This discipline contributed to the Americans' confusion and kept the Kido Butai's exact position hidden for days. The implications of these operational uncertainties are studied by modern naval strategists. The Pacific in 1941 was an enormous, poorly monitored battlespace. Radar was primitive. Radio intelligence was inconsistent. And long-range reconnaissance aircraft were few in number. Japan exploited these weaknesses with precision. In many ways, the fog of war was as much an ally to the Imperial Japanese Navy as the Zero fighter or the Type 91 torpedo. Reflection on these events reveals an uncomfortable truth. Had Japan chosen to redirect its carriers toward Hawaii for a second strike or even a limited invasion attempt, the United States would have been hard-pressed to detect the movement in time. All the necessary ingredients for disaster, uncertainty, miscommunication, resource shortages, were present. The Pacific Fleet, lacking eyes and ears, would have struggled to respond effectively. As December 9th drew to a close, tension remained high on both sides. Japan's fleet plotted its return course, but its silence kept American commanders scanning the horizon with increasing desperation. Every hour brought new rumors, of landings on Maui, of carriers sighted off Kauai, of enemy submarines blocking the west coast. None were confirmed. Yet none were dismissed. And as leaders struggled to decipher intentions thousands of miles away, one unnerving possibility solidified. If the Japanese had elected not to withdraw after Pearl Harbor, but instead steer toward a second phase of operations, Hawaii might already be facing a new and unthinkable threat. That possibility becomes the focus of the next stage in our unfolding story. Just before midnight on December 10, 1941, an urgent message crackled through the communications bunker at Fort Shafter. Unidentified aircraft sighted north of Oahu. Altitude unknown. It was a brief transmission, garbled by static, but its implications sent a ripple of unease through the Hawaiian department. For 2 days, commanders had waited for clarity, confirmation that the Japanese fleet had truly withdrawn. Instead, they received only half-formed signals, lost patrol planes, and now this, an unexplained radar echo that vanished as quickly as it appeared. It was enough to reignite the fear that Nagumo's carriers might still be lurking within operational range. For the soldiers of the U.S. 24th and 25th Infantry Divisions, the struggle was immediate and physical. Exhausted from sleepless nights, they fortified the roads leading inland from Oahu's beaches. The 298th and 299th Infantry Regiments, units of the Hawaii National Guard, constructed hasty barricades near Haleiwa, Kahuku, and Waimanalo. Machine gun teams hauled Browning M1917s up rocky slopes overlooking possible landing beaches. Engineers laid out barbed wire dragged from storage depots still covered in dust. These men were not battle-hardened Marines. Most had never heard a shot fired in anger until 2 days earlier. Now, every distant rumble of surf sounded like the approach of troop transports. Historical insight reveals just how tense those hours were. After the Pearl Harbor attack, U.S. coastal radar sites, Opana, Coco Head, and Kauailoa, were ordered to run nearly continuously. But the SCR-270 radar system, though advanced for its time, was unreliable. Operators frequently mistook rain squalls or flocks of birds for aircraft. A diary entry from Corporal James Laird, a radar technician stationed at Opana Point, captures the atmosphere. "We tracked something tonight. Could have been weather. Could have been them. Nobody knows. Everyone's afraid to be wrong again." Meanwhile, the Army Air Forces scrambled to re-establish reconnaissance coverage. The 72nd Bombardment Squadron attempted to launch B-18 Bolos from Hickam Field, but many aircraft were damaged, some beyond repair. A few P-40 Warhawks managed brief patrols, but fuel scarcity and lack of early warning coordination limited their range. The disappearance of the 2 PBY Catalina patrol planes, likely lost to Zeros during their search for the Japanese fleet, cast a dark shadow. If long-range reconnaissance aircraft could simply vanish without trace, What else could be slipping through the Pacific unnoticed? A chilling reveal arrived in the form of a message from Midway Atoll. A patrol aircraft reported seeing what appeared to be an oil slick roughly 180 miles northwest of Oahu. Oil on the surface could mean nothing, or it could mean a carrier group had passed through recently. The aircraft attempted to track the slick's direction but lost visibility in deteriorating weather. No enemy vessels were sighted. The report, though inconclusive, added to a growing sense that the Japanese had not withdrawn as cleanly as American commanders hoped. Strategists today still analyze these hours as an example of information collapse, where fragments of data suggest multiple interpretations, none of them comforting. The psychological toll of Pearl Harbor had not yet lifted. Civil defense spotters flooded the switchboards with reports of lights offshore, shadows in the sky, and suspicious vessels. At one point, a nervous coastal artillery platoon near Kahuku nearly fired on a U.S. destroyer returning from patrol, mistaking its silhouette for a Japanese escort ship. Despite the confusion, the Army attempted to impose structure. Lieutenant General Walter Short, removed from command but still on Oahu, advised that the northern beaches remained the most likely invasion points. His reasoning echoed pre-war Joint Army-Navy Exercise No. 6, which had demonstrated that an aggressor could theoretically land forces on Oahu's less fortified shores. The 25th Infantry Division focused its strength there, while elements of the 24th dug in along the leeward coast. Roadblocks sprouted across the island, manned by troops clutching rifles still cleaned of Pearl Harbor's dust. Modern reflections highlight an important truth. Military organizations under shock often overreact to shadows while missing real threats. In December 1941, the U.S. command feared paratroopers, seaborne landings, and sabotage, all at once. None occurred. But fear alone shaped decisions, deployments, and expectations. As the afternoon of December 10 faded into night, searchlights swept across Oahu's beaches, triggered by false alarms and nervous sentries. The sea remained quiet. No landing craft approached. No carriers materialized on the horizon. Yet the worries would not fade. Every soldier sensed something unspoken, that the silence itself was its own warning. Fuel tanks at Pearl Harbor still burned. Damaged battleships settled deeper into the mud. Communications centers reported intermittent interference, some of which they could not explain. And across the island, the question filled every bunker and trench. If the Japanese carriers were gone, why did nothing feel like it was over? The answer, military, strategic, and deeply personal for those who lived through it, begins to take shape as we move toward the hypothetical moment planners feared most, a landing on Hawaiian shores. Just after sunrise on December 11, 1941, a classified report circulated through the War Department in Washington. It summarized a pre-war analysis known only to a handful of planners. If Japan ever attempted a landing on Oahu, the beaches near Haleiwa and Kailua offered the most feasible terrain. The report had been filed away months earlier, overshadowed by confidence in Pearl Harbor's naval defenses. Now, pulled back into the light, it took on a new meaning. What had once been a theoretical scenario now aligned chillingly with the reconnaissance gaps and mysterious sightings of the past 3 days. On Oahu itself, the struggle moved from abstract fear to concrete preparation. Units of the U.S. Army's 25th Infantry Division fanned out along the island's northern and eastern shores. At Haleiwa, the 35th Infantry Regiment dug defensive trenches through sand still scorched from burning aircraft wreckage. Near Kailua, artillerymen from the 13th Field Artillery Battalion positioned their 75mm guns behind hastily constructed earthen berms. Marine detachments, remnants of Pearl Harbor's surviving forces, joined the line with improvised equipment salvaged from damaged depots. Many wore uniforms still torn or stained from the attack. These deployments reflected not only tactical planning but also the human toll of fear and exhaustion. Soldiers worked in silence, interrupted only by aircraft engines or shouted orders. Eyewitness accounts paint a vivid picture. In a letter never meant to be published, Sergeant Lewis Henley of the 27th Infantry wrote, "We don't know if they're coming, but we feel it. Somewhere out in that dark water, there's something waiting. We can all sense it." His words, though burdened by fatigue, captured the collective tension spreading across the island. Meanwhile, historical insight reveals that Japan, had it chosen to invade, would have likely deployed its Special Naval Landing Forces, the SNLF, elite troops often compared to U.S. Marines. These units had already proven their skill in amphibious assaults in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and across Southeast Asia. Their typical landing craft, the Daihatsu barges, were well suited for shallow water approaches and could have hit Oahu's beaches under cover of naval air power. While no such flotilla had been launched in reality, Allied planners in later years studied the possibility carefully. Their conclusions were sobering. Had an invasion force reached Oahu, the initial hours of combat would have been brutal, close quarters, and unpredictable. The reveal that intensified anxiety came from several independent civilian reports. On the morning of December 11th, fishermen off Waialua claimed to have seen silhouettes on the horizon, larger than any ship we know. Civil defense authorities logged the report but lacked the means to verify it. Later that afternoon, coastal observers on Pu'u-o-Mahuka Heiau Ridge reported flashes out to sea, possibly sunlight glinting off metal, possibly nothing at all. No confirming evidence surfaced, yet the accumulation of ambiguous signals wore on military leadership. This uncertainty proved especially dangerous for coastal artillery crews. The 3rd Battalion, 15th Coast Artillery Regiment manned batteries at Fort Kamehameha and Diamond Head. These defenses were formidable in theory, but many guns were positioned to protect the harbor entrance, not the open beaches of the northern shore. As a result, several units improvised firing arcs using field artillery or repurposed naval guns from damaged ships. Technicians spent long hours calibrating range tables for targets they might never see. Modern reflection highlights the significance of such improvisation. In wartime, especially under sudden threat, armies often fight with what they have, not what they need. Hawaii's defenses were designed to deter naval attack, not repel a full amphibious assault coordinated with carrier air power. Had Japan advanced, American forces would have relied heavily on grit, terrain familiarity, and scattered pockets of resistance. As evening approached on December 11th, nerves tightened even further. Patrols along the beaches reported unusual debris, driftwood, some rope fragments, and what appeared to be an empty fuel drum. Most likely it had washed ashore from damaged harbor infrastructure, but the timing set imaginations racing. Floodlights swept the surf as waves crashed in rhythmic darkness. Every shadow seemed alive. In several locations, tensions nearly turned deadly. At Haleiwa, a marine fire team opened fire on what they believed was a landing craft approaching in the dusk. The target turned out to be a drifting barge broken loose during the attack on December 7th. Similar incidents erupted near Mokulai and Laie, each time revealing only the war's psychological burden on overstretched troops. During these tense hours, insights from wartime diaries add a powerful human dimension. Corporal Robert Silva of the 298th Infantry, positioned near Loniakea Beach, wrote, "I could hear the ocean breathing. Every time a wave rose, I thought I saw hulls behind it. Every time the wind blew, I thought it carried voices." His reflections underscore how fear, even without enemy presence, created a battlefield of the mind. As December 11th faded into the blackness of night, no landing force appeared. Yet the tension did not diminish. The silence felt unnatural, heavy, and far from reassuring. Commanders could not shake the feeling that something, either a second strike, a reconnaissance raid, or a landing, was drawing closer. And with each passing hour of unresolved alerts and unanswered questions, the possibility of an imminent Japanese move grew harder to dismiss. In the coming hours, the threat would shift once again, this time from the beaches of Oahu to the vast Pacific, where American ships began to vanish in the open ocean. In the pre-dawn darkness of December 12, 1941, a troubling message reached the Pacific Fleet headquarters. Convoy 23, overdue. Last report 0300 hours. No contact since. The missing convoy, a modest group of supply vessels escorted by 2 aging destroyers, had been en route from San Diego to Pearl Harbor with urgently needed ammunition, aviation fuel, and replacement aircraft parts. Its disappearance sent a chilling reminder through American command. Japan's submarines were still out there, hunting. And the Pacific, vast and unforgiving, could swallow entire formations without leaving a trace. For the U.S. Navy, the struggle was twofold. First, rebuilding the shattered Pacific Fleet required immediate resupply and reinforcement. Second, the Navy had to protect its remaining carriers, USS Enterprise and USS Lexington, now the lifeline of American naval power in the region. Their aircraft provided the only credible offensive capability left in the Central Pacific. But fuel shortages, damaged infrastructure, and incomplete intelligence made their movements perilous. Every decision by Admiral William Pye, now acting commander after Kimmel's removal, carried immense risk. Few people today realize how fragile the U.S. position truly was in those days after Pearl Harbor. The West Coast's naval bases were far from fully mobilized. Destroyer escorts were scarce. Submarine patrols, though determined, were hampered by defective torpedoes and poor coordination. Long-range patrol aircraft were spread thin between Alaska, Midway, and Hawaii. And in the deep waters east of Oahu, the Japanese submarine fleet, especially the I-boat groups, operated aggressively. Intelligence later confirmed that I-9, I-17, and I-23 patrolled these very sea lanes during December 1941, a detail that aligns well with the disappearance of convoys. A revealing entry from an ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, analyst on December 12 reads, "We must assume enemy submarines are present along all approach routes to Oahu. No convoy can be considered safe." This wasn't speculation, it was a sober assessment based on intercepted activity patterns and earlier submarine sightings. That same day, a PBY Catalina from Patrol Squadron VP-14 spotted an oil slick near the expected route of Convoy 23 but found no survivors, no wreckage, and no signal flares. The ocean offered no answers. Meanwhile, the Navy's attempt to mount a counterstrike added to the strain. USS Enterprise, under Admiral Halsey, raced toward Hawaii from Wake Island. USS Lexington steamed southwest, carrying aircraft intended to reinforce Midway. But coordination between them was limited. Radio silence protocols, still in effect after the Pearl Harbor disaster, prevented real-time updates. Fuel boilers on several destroyers escorting the carriers began to run dangerously low. What should have been a unified American response dissolved into scattered, isolated movements across thousands of miles. The tension deepened when, late on December 12, another incident unfolded. A merchant ship approaching Oahu reported seeing a periscope cutting through the waves just 20 miles off Diamond Head. Coastal artillery batteries sounded general alarm. 2 destroyers swept the area but found nothing. Yet the report aligned with known Japanese submarine positions, particularly the I-16 class, which was equipped for long-range operations. American commanders couldn't confirm the sighting, but they also couldn't dismiss it. This lack of certainty weighed heavily on sailors. In a letter from Seaman First Class Daniel Corrin aboard the destroyer USS Blue, he wrote, "We sail into an ocean full of shadows. The captain says to trust our instruments, but the sea doesn't care what instruments we have." His words capture the psychological burden placed upon crews tasked with navigating waters where enemy submarines could strike without warning. Modern naval analysts often cite December 1941 as one of the most dangerous periods for American shipping in the Pacific. Japanese submarines operated with efficiency and boldness, sinking or damaging vessels from Hawaii to the California coast. The disappearance of multiple ships during these weeks was not supernatural or mysterious. It was a direct result of aggressive Japanese tactics and the limited detection capabilities of the era. Yet, in this unfolding alternate scenario, these disappearances take on an even more ominous tone. If Japan had been preparing for a second phase of operations targeting Hawaii, degrading American reinforcement efforts would have been essential. Submarines would serve as silent gatekeepers, severing the lifelines needed to defend or resupply the islands. By late afternoon on December 12, Admiral Pye received another worrying report. A second convoy, this one led by the transport USS Wharton, was delayed and had broken radio silence to report possible contact with enemy submarine. The message ended abruptly. It was unknown whether communication was interrupted intentionally or by disaster. The Pacific's growing tally of missing ships added a grim new dimension to America's strategic concerns. Reflection on this day reveals a key truth. Wars aren't lost only through major battles. Sometimes, it is the slow erosion of supply lines, the attrition of small ships, and the accumulation of uncertainty that undermine a nation's ability to respond. The Pacific, in those days, became a graveyard of unanswered questions. As darkness fell on December 12, radio operators at Pearl Harbor monitored the airwaves with mounting anxiety. Convoys remained missing. Submarine contacts went unconfirmed. And somewhere beyond the range of American patrols, the Japanese fleet, if it indeed had not fully withdrawn, still held the initiative. The fear that Hawaii's isolation was tightening hour by hour would set the stage for the final and most consequential development in this unfolding scenario: a Pacific balance tipping toward collapse. Before dawn on December 13, 1941, a silence settled over the Hawaiian Islands, an uneasy, unnatural calm. At Fort Ruger's underground command post, officers stared at a single message pinned to the operations board: no contact with Convoy 23 or Wharton Group. No new sightings of the Japanese fleet. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it deepened the mystery. Throughout the Pacific, American ships had gone missing, reconnaissance failed to spot enemy movements, and every attempt at clarity dissolved into conflicting reports. It was as if the ocean itself were concealing the truth. For commanders facing the possibility of Hawaii's isolation, this silence felt more dangerous than open battle. The struggle now was larger than any single missing convoy or submarine threat. It was strategic and psychological. With Pearl Harbor's battleships sunk or crippled, the U.S. military shifted its focus to continental defense. The War Department ordered fortification of San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Seattle. Air raid drills became routine along the Pacific coast. In Hawaii, the remaining aircraft of the 14th Pursuit Wing were dispersed into camouflaged revetments. Anti-aircraft guns, salvaged from wrecked ships like USS Pennsylvania and USS Maryland, were positioned across Oahu. Soldiers dug trenches in fields still littered with debris from the attacks 6 days earlier. Yet despite the flurry of activity, one unsettling reality confronted the U.S. command. Without reliable reconnaissance, no one knew what Japan planned next. Intelligence from Station HYPO remained thin. Japanese naval transmissions were sporadic. Direction-finding stations detected faint signals far to the west, possibly the Kido Butai's carriers, but none remained long enough to triangulate. The Pacific, vast and empty, swallowed every clue. Historical insight reveals just how dire America's situation might have been had Japan pressed its advantage. With Hawaii hypothetically under siege or even occupied, Washington would have been forced into a prolonged defensive stance. Yamamoto's gamble, crippling the U.S. before its full industrial capacity awoke, might have gained new potency. The Pacific Fleet's surviving carriers would be stretched across thousands of miles, racing between crises, vulnerable to submarine ambushes and low on fuel. Guam and Wake Island had already fallen or were under attack. The Philippines, under General Douglas MacArthur, faced encirclement. Everything pointed toward a Pacific theater on the verge of collapse. The reveal that captured this growing sense of crisis came from a decoded Japanese diplomatic cable intercepted on December 13. The message referenced operations beyond the initial blow, with no mention of target or timeline. Analysts could not determine whether the cable referred to Southeast Asia, the Philippines, or, more ominously, the Central Pacific. Although historians today know Japan ultimately chose not to invade Hawaii, the document underscored how opaque Japanese intentions were at the time. Its vague phrasing left American planners bracing for multiple worst-case scenarios simultaneously. Diaries from soldiers on Oahu reflect the emotional strain. Private Edward Kane of the 24th Infantry Division wrote, "Every night we listen for engines. Every morning we expect to see ships on the horizon." A Navy gunner aboard USS Enterprise captured the mood more bluntly. "We know they hit us once. We don't know why they wouldn't do it again." These entries highlight how fear, not of what was known, but of what wasn't, shaped the mindset across the American defense establishment. Modern reflection on these events offers valuable lessons. Military historians note that incomplete intelligence often creates more danger than accurate enemy assessments. Decision-makers, overwhelmed by uncertainty, prepare for everything and thus risk being effective in nothing. The United States in December 1941 teetered in this state, racing to defend its coasts, rebuild its fleet, and safeguard essential supply lines, all while blinded by the vastness of the Pacific. By late afternoon on December 13th, Admiral Pai convened an emergency briefing. Reports came in from San Diego warning of another convoy delay. From Midway, an outpost commander relayed an unconfirmed sighting of aircraft, possibly hostile, at extreme distance. In the Aleutians, weather stations reported strange radio interference. Any of these could have meant nothing, or any one of them could have signaled a broader Japanese operation unfolding beyond America's reach. The emotional climax of the day came when a battered communications team at Pearl Harbor received a partial message from one of the missing convoys. Only 4 words broke through the static before the transmission vanished forever. Enemy sighted. Multiple. That was all. Whether torpedoes, aircraft, or deception caused the blackout, no one could say. The Pacific kept its secrets. As December 13th turned to night, searchlights swept the beaches. Radar operators strained to distinguish real echoes from noise. Sailors aboard Enterprise and Lexington braced for possible air attack. The Hawaiian Islands lay in darkness, their defenders exhausted but alert. No invasion had come, yet every instinct told commanders the crisis was far from over. If Japan had captured Hawaii, or even temporarily controlled its waters, the entire balance of the Pacific War would have shifted. Supply chains, strategy, morale, and political resolve would all have been tested in ways the United States barely imagined in those early days. This is where the story leaves us, not with supernatural mystery, but with the real historical uncertainty that defined the Pacific in December 1941. Ships vanished. Signals failed. Leadership struggled. And the Pacific, vast, silent, and unforgiving, held the power to change the course of history with every unreturned call and unanswered question.